right, I'm going to call to order the March 8th, 2021 Canandaigua Town Board meeting. This time, call to order and Pledge of Allegiance led by Town Councilman Terry Finelli. Everyone rise for Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America,
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kathy Manicarts. I'm the Town Supervisor for the Town of Canandaigua. At this time, I will ask our Town Clerk, Jean Chrisman, to confirm that the meeting was properly advertised.
Yes, it was.
And could you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilman Gary Davis,
Present.
Councilwoman Linda Dvorak,
Present.
Councilman Terry Fennelly,
Present.
Supervisor Kathy Manicarts,
Present.
and Councilman Jared Simpson.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. At this time, we have our first privilege of the floor, but I would ask if those who have comments hold them until after our priority business. I think our priority business may be of interest to those of you who have comments to make. And before we go any further, I believe we have Mr. Kevin Saunders, counsel for the Kellogg family with us. I think he would like to be heard. Can you unmute Kevin, Doug? You're unmuted, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Madam Supervisor. And Town Board, thank you very much. As you're aware, over the weekend, my colleague Dana Campbell submitted a termination letter, cancellation letter, and also the Kellogg family submitted a letter. And I'm only going to read, I know I have 3 minutes, so I'm only going to read the first paragraph and refer everyone to the Town Board website under the Tishner Point project. As submitted earlier today, we, the Kellogg family, have made the difficult decision to cancel the contract to sell Tishner Point to the town. To sell our family property to the town for use as a park was a dream for us. It would have preserved this great location for public access to Canandaigua Lake and also been a great legacy for our family, particularly our parents. To that end, we have worked to be patient and supportive of the town's process. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, we can no longer pursue this sale. In some, the delay, the cost, and unexpected legal fees and the misinformation and hatred directed toward our family has made continuing down this path untenable. While this is a great disappointment for us, we feel it is the best decision for our family. And again, the Kellogg family wanted to express to the town board their gratitude and for your patience and working with them, is both my email and Ms. Campbell's email said to the town board. We thank you. The only thing we also wanted to add, Madam Supervisor and town board members, is if this referendum goes forward, we urge the town board to not, I don't want to use the word punish, but if you go forward with a referendum, one of the things mentioned in this letter was the fact that the broker has the spring and the summer to sell this property because there is no PSA right now. And we ask that if any referendum did go forward, that it list a generic number that the town can buy a property along the lake up to a certain amount and not list the 4351 Tishner Point. As you're well aware, there were interested parties beforehand, and the referendum listing this specific address could deter potential buyers. And as you well know, we thank you again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, we thank the town board for saying we understand the Kellogg's have been patient, and all we're doing is urging the town board to, let the Kellogg's market this without this referendum specifically naming this property, so any potential buyer would be able to buy this free and clear. And that's what we're requesting. Thank you very much, Madam Supervisor and town board.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. And for those of you who would like to read the rest of the letter, it is on our website. And thank you, Mr. Saunders, and thank you to the Kellogg family as well for their patience. As part of our priority business, we intended to do an information session relating to the proposed purchase of 4351 Tishner Point Drive. obviously that situation has changed at this particular moment. I do think we should continue to have discussion, however, about purchasing, and as Mr. Saunders mentioned, purchasing property in the future, whether it's this or other property. And part of a lot of the comments that we got, other than those who were in favor, and there were many that were in favor of it, was that the survey that had previously been done did not adequately represent a large enough sampling of the public. So one thing that I was thinking that the best way to do that is a referendum, whether it's this or in general about purchase of park property. And I would like to continue discussion on that in general, so that if a property becomes available, as I said, whether it's this or another one, and I'd like to hear from my fellow town board members if they'd like to be heard, or otherwise, if anyone else has any information they'd like to share, Doug and or Chris Nadler. I realize based upon the letter that we received over the weekend, that may have changed. Would anyone else like to be heard on the town board or town manager?
I guess I would say, Kathy, that this situation has made me question a little bit whether or not, unless we could do something quickly enough, whether or not referendum is always the right answer. Because it seems like sometimes, we are turning to the public to say, would you like this? When we have a lot of documented information that said this was part of our comprehensive plan, all of these things. So I'm really in support of the referendum, but I'm questioning in my own mind whether or not that is the necessary step, or if we could do it as quickly as possible if we needed to, because it seems like any seller is never going to want to wait for, the process has already gone on since November. And I guess I feel like we're already in March. It seems like it would take us a whole year if we're always going to use referendum.
And I guess for those of you who don't realize, town board does not meet other than here. We may speak individually, but due to open meetings laws, all these meetings have been open. Our discussion has been open. And thank you, Linda. Our individual feelings on this. I know you've heard I'm in favor of the process. Ultimately, it's up to in my opinion, it's up to the people of the town. My concern is obviously committing the town residents to paying taxes depending on the price of the property. So my personal feeling was similar to what Mr. Saunders said. If we could do a referendum with a maximum amount, people would know how much their taxes would be affected, and all the other questions that have previously been answered. There may be another piece of property that comes up. If we do it within a certain period of time, give it a deadline. I think those are things that we need to talk about. I think through this process, I've particularly learned that many people are in favor of, they were in favor of this project in particular, but in favor of preserving lakefront property and making it accessible to the public as well. So I don't know if any of my other town board members have any feelings on that. We have a meeting on Monday. In the meantime, we can talk about something on the agenda to this effect, or as you know, we don't talk privately about it, but go ahead, Linda.
Would it make sense for us to still go through the information that was provided about this property and then make a decision on, would we do a referendum, maybe as Mr. Saunders asks, with a blank amount? And, it may work out for this property, or it may be the answer for a property down the road.
Well, I think we should go ahead with the process that we've been outlining. I think all of us have agreed over time that the proper way to go about this is to have a referendum to find out just exactly how many people support this and how many don't. I mean, we have this rough kind of
Tally.
on the cuff tally of people that are pro and people that are opposed to it. I think we should stick to that original proposal, go ahead with a referendum, put a number in just so that people have a number in mind, pick a number, just so that it could say, well, that translates into X number of dollars per year. But we should go ahead with it. We should do it in as expeditious a manner as possible. Everybody would like to see this resolved one way or another. In my opinion, the only way to really find out what a larger number of residents feel, and that's presuming, of course, they turn up to vote, and that's a presumption, obviously. I mean, we have been told that surveys in the past have not been scientific, they've not been analytical, they've not been this or that. Well, if we schedule a referendum and we open it up to the electors of the town, let people come in and tell us what their opinion is, for me, that's good enough. That is a clear indication of what people really want. And myself, speaking only for myself, I would support whatever the majority of the people in the town want to see us do. And as I said, I think we should, next week at our meeting on the 15th, have a resolution brought forth with the kind of schedule that we've been talking about, sometime late in May, whenever, I don't know what the time within, it has to be a certain number of days after the resolution. We should just do it and be done with it. It's fair for us, fair for the family, fair for everybody concerned.
And if I
think
could just
for that-
interrupt and ask Chris Nadler to explain what the timeline would be, depending on which route we took, whether we did it at the general election or at a special election.
So it would seem to me, Madam Supervisor, that you have options here. One, walk away completely and, start this process from scratch when another piece of land comes up, or if Kellogg property is still available at some point from scratch. It seems like from the feedback just now that town board's not interested in that. So you have a couple options. You could either do a referendum, or since the permissive referendum section of New York State town law was amended very recently, it actually changes the dates to make the time frame longer. You can have a special election under Article 6 of the New York State town law, and that's outlined in my memorandum that I sent on March 5th. If at your March 15th meeting, you adopted a resolution setting a special election, which is specifically contemplated in Article 6 of New York State town law, town board may put forth for a special election a proposition as to whether the town should purchase land for a town park. At some point in April, your April 19th meeting, you'd have to adopt certain resolutions setting forth the parameters of the election, what it's going to be, phrasing the actual question. In early May, you would have voter registration. I'll be able to tell you more in April if we go forward with this process, what that would entail. I put in my memorandum May 20th for the actual election day. It could be any day in a 15 day window around May 20th. Town law actually specifies that after the election inspectors count the votes immediately and certify it to the town clerk, and you could start buying property as early as June. It's a pretty straightforward process. There's a lot of legwork for the town to do this. I'm not certain on the costs of what a special election would cost. But it seems like something that could be primarily done in-house, or the Board of Elections could run, but I think that gets significantly more expensive if the Board of Elections does. With this, with a special election or a permissive referendum, there's no, but the contract has been canceled, there's no urgency other than the nature of the issue. So you could set the election for just about any time.
So now, sorry, Chris, are you done? I didn't mean to cut you off. Usually that's your job.
Come on, man. That was my conclusion.
All right, so I agreeing with what Terry said. I think we're not talking about for something like this, we're not talking about a highway garage or a water treatment plant that has to be done and pushed forward. Any expense like this for something that, yes, is something that people have said that they want, but it is definitely a want. I think it has to go to referendum, and it has to allow the voice of people to speak. I too, when you mentioned the cost, Chris, I am concerned of wondering the cost of a special election versus running it with a general election in November, which would then free us up to know that we have the permission to spend X amount of dollars towards parkland, and we have that possibility and that sitting there, if you will, if a situation like this comes up again. I don't know how I feel about rushing the situation right now and trying to get it in by a certain timeline. From what the Kellogg family, and I have the utmost respect for all of them and the situation that they're in right now and their willingness to work with us on this. I don't know if they have the desire to push forward, as they mentioned, the fear of lawsuits and litigation and other things that could be coming down the road. So I, again, would not want to put any undue pressure on them. So I don't know if it's in our best interest and theirs and everyone's to rush forward and, and set this date rather than waiting to November.
If I may, can I ask Mr. Saunders a question? If you're in a position to answer, if not, I completely understand. But if the town were to go to referendum and then we're ready, willing, and able, all other things being clear, would the Kellogg family be willing to go forward with the town as purchaser, or are they done, so to speak?
Madam Supervisor, are you talking about, I was trying to unmute myself here. So were you talking about my, I'm not the most tech savvy person in the world.
So in the meantime, they could go ahead, and if a purchaser came forward that, they would sell to whatever. But in the meantime, if we worked toward a referendum, and as you said, a general referendum perhaps, and if the public were to vote in favor of it, would the Kellogg family be willing to, assuming there were no other contingencies in the contract, would they be willing to sell to the town? Or are they done with selling to the town completely?
Madam Supervisor,
Or don't you know yet?
Trip Pearson is on as well.
What's that?
Trip Pearson is on as well, if you wanted to defer that question to him.
Yeah, Trip, if you want to join with me.
Have to give me just a second to unmuting. So.
Doug's unmuting him.
And if I may, while he's getting unmuted, it looks like I'm still able to talk. Again, we can't thank you enough, Town Board and Madam Supervisor. Thank you for entertaining the possibility of a generic referendum. I mean, to me, it makes too much sense because it allows the Kellogg family to move forward immediately to those parties that were interested. And you all get, if you do decide to go forward with a referendum, which it sounds like you are all in unanimous decision to do that, with that generic property, if the Kellogg's did sell it to a private buyer, you wouldn't have wasted all your time and money. You would have the authority and the backing, if the referendum passed, to buy lakefront property that comports with your comprehensive plan. And I believe 2 years ago, your Parks and Rec plan, about 82% wanting more beach access. And so you don't lose your time and you don't punish the Kellogg's as well. Everyone wins in that scenario. And I don't know if Trip is on, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, all I would say is, Kathy, that there are several people that comprise the ownership of that property, and so certainly if I don't know, whatever the date would be, June 1st, if that had just passed and there was still nobody on the radar, they would certainly consider it, of course. I mean, they're trying to sell an asset that's been in the family for a very long time. And so they would, they would have to have a conversation about it, the four of them. But it's not
Okay.
a no, I mean, they're not gonna, dismiss anybody out of hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy,
Yes,
I've tried to get in a couple times, but somebody else beat me to the punch on it. I also am in favor of a referendum. I've always felt that way. I know in the comp plan for 2003 and the one for 2011, plus the latest one they're working on, that the public indicated they'd like more lake access. But with the referendum, we'll hopefully have a bigger sampling to see what the people think in that regard. So I definitely have always felt that we certainly need to let the people make the decisions, not just the five of us on the board, ultimately. So that's my thoughts.
okay. All right. Doug, in the interim, I know you've done a lot of work in terms of putting a lot of stuff on the website. In the past couple of weeks, I know that you've worked with something such as site plan distance. I'm using the wrong terminology, I'm sure. Would you be willing to share any of that information at this time, or would you prefer to leave that to such time as if a referendum is passed?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions that the town board has, and kind of talk about some of the things that we've been able to find. Let me just kind of walk through some stuff, and feel free, town board members, to jump in here, interrupt me, ask questions as we kind of go. I'm just so everybody knows where this is. If you go to the town website and you click on projects, this is the easiest way to get there, and click on lakefront land acquisition. So I'm doing this live while we're talking. Everything is here, including that original January the 11th presentation. You've got public comments that have been posted here and tabulated. And then there's information, and we're talking specifically tonight about 4351 Tishner Point Drive. Everything is here right on the website for anybody to look at any time. The cancellation notice from the attorney for the sellers, the statement from the family that was referenced earlier, as well as our additional information that we've been sharing over the last couple of weeks. We had a finance committee meeting in mid-February, and we said, okay, there's been a lot of comments, a lot of questions. Sometimes they're different variations of a similar topic, but we decided that you decided as a board, and we talked about in the finance meeting, that we were going to group these together to address these, because it was going to be impossible to address every single little comment that everyone had requested. And so we grouped these into categories, being the additional information that the town board had requested, process and financial impact questions, additional information, town board existing conditions, and then additional information relative to the proposed conditions and future use. Madam Supervisor, is there a specific area you wanted to ask me about? Do you want me to just touch on them, or?
I do have one particular question which came up, and then if you could just touch on them. So
Okay.
it has been asked that how much the taxes would go, approximately how much the taxes would go up. And if that was over the tax cap, how would that affect the town of Canandaigua?
Right. Okay. So let's just walk through that just for a moment here. So what we did was I really put together, and this was from a joint conversation that all of us had together. We tried to provide narrative relative to the question or the category, as well as additional exhibits and information in each of these responses. So this first category of tax rate, increase in tax bill, and then a relative comment to taxes already being too high. So in the category here, we reference the town's tax rate is $1.03, and in the exhibit, you can see the breakdown of that. The lowest assessed home in the town of Canandaigua was $14,000. The highest assessed home in the town of Canandaigua was $4,810,000. The average home in the town of Canandaigua is approximately $300,000 is the assessed value for the average home. So what that equates to when you really break down, and it spells out all the details here, but basically what it equates to is a increase in the tax rate to service a debt service payment for approximately, say, $5.5 to $6 million. A debt service payment would mean that we would need to increase the tax rate from $1.03 per thousand to $1.15 per $1,000 of assessed value. That would be the tax rate impact. So going back to that whole analogy, and I know I did a newsletter article relative to the $38, but that's where that comes from. The average home in the town of Canandaigua was assessed at $300,000. We have, like I said, you know, having a house assessed at $14,000 and one assessed at $4.8 million. We're a very growing community with a broad population, and we have quite a variety and diversity of homes and zoning districts and uses. So that average of that 15 cents, or I'm sorry, that 12 cents to that $1.15 tax rate per $1,000 of assessed value, that would come out for that average home at a $38 annual increase in the town taxes. And that, you know, that detail is detailed in the exhibit. I'll flip to that in just a second. And then specifically the tax cap. You know, what ramifications does that have if the town exceeds the tax cap? So the town board has full authority to exceed the tax cap. The town board, if it chooses to exceed the tax cap, which is 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower, then the town board has that authority to do that. What impact does that have to the residents of the town of Canandaigua? None, zero. The state of New York previously offered a property tax freeze credit, but that program ended in 2016. That's not to say that who knows if the legislature would ever bring something back, but the last couple of years when we've had to exceed the tax cap, it has had zero impact on the residents of the town of Canandaigua in terms of any type of rebates or anything, because the state just hasn't offered it. Let me just scroll down here just real quickly to that chart. And I know this is going fast, but this is back from that original presentation back on January 11th, showing the town tax rate at $1.03, and then the total amount that we would need to levy for specifically the tax rate if we were to have that additional debt service payment, and then what that means. And then here's the actual homes, and then this comparison, what does it mean? And then we kind of get even into the details. So for this average $300,000 home in the town of Canandaigua, it's the $38 increase for the town taxes, taking it from $310 to $348 per year. So.
And when we talk about tax cap, that's a percentage of the levy, not the percentage of how much the tax is raised. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's actually a pretty complex formula that is based on, it includes the prior year's levy. It includes things like the pilots that we may have in place, payment in lieu of taxes that may be in place. It also includes a variety of other factors. It's a formula that the New York State Comptroller's Office puts together, and I have to plug in all the numbers, and then it tells us what the total amount we can levy. So you're absolutely correct. It's based on the levy. It is not based on the tax rate.
So even when new buildings are built and we, in theory, get more, if a lot of buildings were built in a particular year and we had a windfall with money coming in, we can't necessarily, we still have to keep the tax levy within the tax cap amount. We can't have a windfall on tax money that comes in, correct?
Or exceed, or the option is exceeding the tax cap. You're correct. Right. And conversely, when, for instance, residents say, hey, we would like you to create a special district for water, sewer, lighting, whatever it is that the residents may request, and then we have to levy that additional amount for the people that are getting that service, that also goes against that total levy that we're allowed to levy. That's what it's called, the total amount that we would be able to levy against the property owners in the town of Canandaigua. So that also impacts the tax cap and whether or not we are tax cap compliant.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes,
and Doug, I was just wondering too, I just see a lot of confusion around referendum in general, because I know we've been having a lot of requests for people to, for us to hold a referendum. And so what I wanted to know, is there something you could point to? Because I was monitoring the chat and people are confused about who is eligible to vote. If you're a taxpayer, are you eligible to vote? If you're a resident, are you eligible to vote? Is there something specific about that? And I know it's governed by New York State law. I just wanted to help people understand it.
So I think, Chris, if you want to jump in here, there is a section on this response where we've actually provided the information here on the website relative to referendum, electors, permissive referendum. You see that here on your screen. And it spells out even the section of New York State law that talks about electors that's listed on here. But I'll defer to the town attorney if you want to jump in here.
No, I agree with what's stated in that document, Doug, that's on the screen right now. It echoes what I said at our last meeting, however unpopular. And to some extent, I understand that the concern, the dissatisfaction with that. Anybody, I will point out, well, I guess first, let me say that New York State law requires that electors of the town be people who have duly registered to vote in the town. They are the people who are eligible to vote for town board and town supervisor, town clerk, and town highway superintendent. That is the definition of the electors of the town of Canandaigua. I can't change that. The town board can't change that. I will point out, New York State law, based on Court of Appeals decisions many years ago, several years ago, allows anybody who has a second home to register to vote in the municipality in which they have a second home. So, people who are taxpayers of Canandaigua, of the town of Canandaigua, can register to vote. There's no unfairness. People aren't being prevented from voting. You'd have to go to the county board of elections and register to vote.
You can't vote in both places though, right?
You gotta just pick one. Thank you, Kathy, for clarifying that. Correct. You can choose to vote in the town of Canandaigua.
As your residency.
Yeah.
Is there a time frame associated with that? I know for voting in the primary, the deadline is in February to change registration. Do we know if there's
The town clerk just looked that up for us. Jean, I think you might be unmuted if you could. I think there was still a window open so that people could register, right?
Yes, I actually called the Board of Elections and they told me that you could change your registration, place of registration up to 3 weeks prior to the date of the referendum.
So that would provide some fairness for the people who are, those who are here and are concerned. It would give them that opportunity as well.
And I think that's a good point, Jared. And I'll tell you, based on my experience with the town, this is to the people who have raised this concern. I can almost guarantee that our town clerk, Jean Christmas, is going to call the town or the county board of elections on that exactly 3 weeks before the referendum election and say, hey, send over every single person you got, because she's very thorough like that. We're not going to try and exclude anybody. This is a town board that has tried to be transparent and inclusive on this throughout this entire process.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good point that it's been brought up here. It's only fair. I mean, if you're paying the freight, you ought to have something to say about it.
Does anyone else have any questions for Doug, or Doug, if you just want to give a summary of?
How about if I just touch on some of these categories and
Sure.
you jump in here? Let me skip over seeker, because let me jump to the proposed here in just a moment, and I'll share a little bit more information about a seeker in a second. But appraisal section, obviously, we've talked about that quite a bit. We've had 2 appraisals, 2 certified appraisers, New York State licensed appraisers. There is information here on this, a lot of detailed information, including additional exhibits that have been provided, the Exhibit D relative to the assessments and what we believe having no direct impact for a assessment on a home next to a municipal park based on additional information that we have, as well as based on a history in the town of Canandaigua. There is provisions to any property owner in the town of Canandaigua that they could certainly speak with the Board of Assessment Review if they feel like there are specific influences or factors that need to be considered relative to their specific situation. I know this has come up. I want to mention, touch base on this, and this isn't going to be popular, and I'm sorry to be a bearer, but we did put it out here. There was comments, multiple comments that were made that, hey, the town is just doing this because the town needs to do a town-wide reval. You're absolutely right. The town needs to do a town-wide reval, but it has nothing to do with the proposed acquisition of 4351 Tishner Point Drive. So a town-wide reval is coming regardless if the town purchased the property or not. The town has said to us that we're at 95% of our equalization rate. That is the trigger that requires, the state of New York has said that to us. So we will be starting a townwide reval later this year that will go over into 2022. And that, regardless if the town purchases property or not, the market is what dictates that, not and basically the assessed values and what's going on with the market conditions. So there's additional information in this document relative to that. Lots of information on this website relative to the proposal, comprehensive plan, survey information, loss of revenue. All this stuff is referenced in this document. Let me jump back over here. So that's this first category, the process and fiscal impact questions and comments. The town attorney a few minutes ago referenced a timeline, a memorandum that he provided. That is also all here. Every single document is on this website. We are fully transparent. You can see everything and anything on this document. Every single document in pro, again, in favor, against, whatever, just even general information is all available on the website here. Existing conditions, you know, when we're looking for at a project that somebody is proposing to the town of Canandaigua, we ask for two things. We ask for existing conditions and we ask for the proposed use or the future use. So when we get into existing conditions, this really talks about what is currently going on in the area of 4351 Tishner Point Drive. And it also references, and there's a lot of information on this website about County Road 16 and what is going on County Road 16. And I know that there's been a lot of comments about speeding vehicles on County Road 16. I hear you. I acknowledge you. The town board has actually, we've put into the budget multiple times now for the last couple of years, and the town board is paying for enhanced law enforcement services along County Road 16 to help identify and really crack down on speeding vehicles. However, the speed studies and even the police are saying the speeding vehicles just are not there. The New York State Department of Transportation has done not less than 5 different studies over various times, and every single time the average speed on County Road 16 is either 38 or 39 miles per hour. And all that stuff is here. You can read all the documents specifically from the New York State Department of Transportation. You can even look at the traffic counts. And I think it's also really important to look at the AADT. That's the annual average daily traffic counts here. And these 2 study areas specifically that were done of County Road 16, one was done just north of the proposed area on Tishner Point Drive, and one was done just south. And the area that is just south is the area that is closest to the property. And you're talking about average annual daily trip counts at 968 vehicles. And for comparison, you see here on the screen all the other numbers. That is the lowest traffic count of any of the roads where we have data for, other than neighborhood residential streets. So for comparison, there are more cars using Emerson Road in the town of Canandaigua than there are County Road 16. So I know that there's a lot of emotion about that issue, but these are the actual data that has been done by both the New York State Department of Transportation as well as Ontario County Public Works. So all that information, there's a lot of information on there. The question has also come up about parking, concerns relative to parking along County Road 16. The town board at any point in time has the ability to enact a local law if they so choose to prohibit parking along County Road 16 in its entirety or certain sections. And so the town board, I would anticipate that if at some point in time there was a park or a piece of property that they were looking to acquire for the purposes of town park, that they would also consider a local law, including holding public hearings, to prohibit parking in an area right around the entrance to that for the safety, as well for the safety of the motorist entering and exiting the property, as well as for the safety of the residents adjacent. And that is exactly what has been done down at Ononda Park. 1,400, you see here on the screen, 1,400 feet north and south of the entrance of Ononda Park, there is a local law that prohibits parking on County Road 16 near Ononda Park. So pedestrian uses, the feasibility study, there's a lot of information. Rather than going through all the detail, I've provided a lot of that information. I know it keeps coming up multiple times. I've talked, we do a lot with the city of Canandaigua in terms of joint parks and recreation programs. Questions kept coming up about Atwater Park. That is a open space protected park, and a lot of that is actually wetland. So when you're talking about the ability to locate restrooms and those types of facilities at Atwater Park, what I'm told is that's not possible. The use of Kershaw Park and maybe the expansion of Kershaw Park, it's possible. Obviously, we'd have to continue to have conversations with the city of Canandaigua, whether or not that an expand beach area at Kershaw Park is the answer here that the residents want. I can't answer that. I know that there's a lot of folks that say that's all that needs to happen and that's good enough. And then there's some people that says that's not good enough, that there needs to be additional access points around the lake. And that's a matter of personal opinion. So let me just jump over here. There's a lot of additional information. Let me just touch on Ononda Park. There's a lot of information on Ononda Park. There's some usage information. Ononda Park, we have been investing more in Ononda Park the last 3 to 4 years than has been invested in the last 20 years in Ononda Park. We've been spending a lot of money doing improvements that you may not necessarily see. We had to start with real basic things like septic systems because there were problems. We were even getting complaints 3 years ago from people who were renting the cabins saying that they couldn't stand to rent the cabin because of the smell from the septic system that was failing. So we've replaced the septic system. We've been replacing roofs. We've been making improvements. We added for 2020 park rangers. For 21, we're getting ready to hopefully cut the ribbon here in the not too distant future once it warms up on the new game room there at Ononda Park. So we have new sidewalks, new ADA accessibility at Ononda Park. So we've really been spending a lot and really focused on continued improvements to Ononda Park. There's more information on that. So before I jump over to proposed, do any of the town board members have any comments or questions or anything?
No, thank you, Doug.
Okay.
Very thorough.
Let me jump over here to proposed. Sorry, I was just letting a few more people in that were in the waiting room. There's also here on the website, there's an email. I had asked Ontario County specific questions about County Road 16, as well as whether or not we could prohibit parking on County Road 16 and what improvements and those types of things that they might be doing relative to that study. That's also available here. Let me share with you proposed conditions. So when we talk, we just looked at existing conditions. Let's just touch on proposed conditions. Points of egress. And actually, I'm going to jump down here for a second because I'm more visual, I think, than I like to look at maps as opposed to reading words. I don't know about you guys, but this is, let me just zoom out so I can get everything in the screen here. This is the property at 4351 Tishner Point Drive. We've talked a lot about different things, but when we talk about specifically points of ingress and egress, this driveway here is Tishner Point Drive. Was, as Kathy referenced in her presentation a couple of weeks ago, this is the former Willow Avenue. And then this section up here is the former Glenmead Avenue. While we know that there are deed restrictions or covenants relative to the area that we would call on the inside of the driveway and this grassy area here, relative to park, there is nothing on the south side of Tishner Point Drive. So for the purposes of looking at, okay, what is it, whether or not that future questions would come up about ingress and egress points about using Tishner Point Drive, it is an option that we could look at using Tishner Point Drive, we believe, and then having a point of entry into a proposed parking area, or we could put our own point of egress directly out to the right-of-way in County Road 16. I know questions had previously come up about an existing driveway that is there. Based on everything that we have, including surveys, that driveway is actually not on the property at 4351 Tishner Point Drive. That's actually in the county right-of-way. So that allows us to have direct access also to the county right-of-way. Whether we use the existing entrance that's there or even create a whole new entrance, either one is an option that would have to be figured out if the town did in fact purchase the property and once we get to proposed plans and site plans. And again, this is a sketch. This is not a site plan. This is a sketch plan to show what could be done. Site plans are more in depth. The approximate parking area here, this is a 20 plus parking bay with no problem fitting that in there whatsoever in a grassy area. I'm just going to jump down here to another exhibit that also shows, if this will just load for me a quick second, that also shows kind of like the aerial image. This parking area that I just showed you there, here's the 2 points of egress. This is predominantly using what is a grassy area here as well as a parking area that's here with limited disturbance relative to the existing vegetation. I counted, I believe it's 22 parking places is what our engineering firm that put this together for us shows that can lay out there with no problem at all, including ADA accessibility, ADA pathway, and it would also be over 100 feet from the center line of the stream as is required by town code with no problem whatsoever. Converting the one of the smaller buildings into restroom facilities for the general public. Obviously, we've talked about preservation of the existing building, the main building as a museum, kind of showing it as a turn of the century cottage museum, as well as some other things that could be shown there and displayed in the museum. There's existing boathouse, no proposed improvements or anything associated with the boathouse. Proposed swimming area between the boathouse and the point with a dock used for fishing and kayaking out near the point. So let me just kind of zip back up here to the narrative. So that's all there. You certainly can view that at any time. We intend to leave all that here on the website. Seeker, I've been working with the town engineer because of the magnitude of the project with the acquisition, the proposed uses, the financing that we had anticipated. We felt it would be best to go ahead and do this as a type 1 action, doing a full environmental assessment to EAF is what it's called, environmental assessment form. That is spelled out, and actually that was completed today. That is actually posted here on the website and available for review. So that has already been completed. The full EAF is available for viewing for anyone. We would then, if the town board decides to move forward, we would begin the 30-day lead agency coordination request. If the town board decides to move forward with this process on their town board meeting on March 15th, that would conclude by mid-April, which still allows us to go through the process to make sure that there's nothing that would negative, we don't believe there is, but would allow us to fully go through the process with SHPO and everything else to make sure there's nothing that would negatively impact the proposed use of the property long before a public vote, if that were to be held in May, if the town board chose to do that. So the proposed sketch plan, I touched base on that. It really kind of went through the bullet points, really limited development of the parcel, preserving it largely intact the way it is, obviously adding the swim area, We did show in the narrative here that we wouldn't be doing anything with that north side of the driveway. I know that there's been some discussions relative to the driveway. Originally, we met with the neighboring property owners about maybe relocating that driveway or the tennis court. The proposal that we're putting forth here for consideration with the sketch would have no improvement. So leaving the driveway and the tennis court right where it's at. And then if that were to be changed later, that would be something that would have to be negotiated from what we understand with the property owners, perhaps. The parking, that's, I just referenced that. Security, I know that's come up a couple of different times. So that's spelled out here. Security, what we do in some of our other parks, in terms of, we would certainly have parking there at the park. Obviously, we would have our park rangers that we've recently added new for 2020 in Onondaga. We would also use park rangers at this new proposed park. Additional considerations would have to be considered when we get to site plan, such as gates or other devices. But we do use cameras. We do use a variety of different mechanisms, as well as we use the police. The police are great about putting it on a priority list to check our parks. And so that we constantly do that, as well as our own staff visit frequently all of our parks. That's not to say nothing ever happens, it does. But when we do find something that happens, we prosecute that with, that's a violation of town code, and then that goes to town court with, you can see their punishments and fines not to exceed $350 for each violation, but that, or possibly imprisonment or both, but that is up to the judge. And then really spelled out the improvements again versus cost. We've learned some things over the last couple of, the last couple of months. The January 11th presentation for this parcel had proposed improvements of $161,000. I really do believe that estimate was pretty accurate. I think the new updated estimate is 162,000. And I've gone back and redouble checked those numbers, so I don't think it's all that far off, including installation of that gravel parking area. And I want to note, because we have done that in the past, Blue Heron Park is still a gravel parking lot that will be, we have planned to convert to paved here very soon. Outhouse Park, for actually 10 years almost, that was a gravel parking lot. We just recently paved. That is something that we do. We let that pack in, and but we would go through that process and then phase the build out for the rest of the parking. The pavement is actually fairly expensive. So the cost of the operation that's spelled out up above, that does include lifeguards, restroom cleaning, and everything that's in the exhibit there. So, okay, I'm talking a lot. Can I answer any questions for the town board members? Or so.
No, I've read everything that you submitted, and I would definitely encourage people to read about it. It gives a good summary.
It really addresses a lot of the questions that have been asked over the past couple of months with factual information, measurements for site distances, speeds, a lot of questions, legitimate questions that were asked. There's a tremendous amount of information contained in all these exhibits.
Terry, I'm glad you said that. Kathy asked me about that, and I'm sorry I forgot to touch on that. The site distance. There actually is a memo here from our town engineering firm. Basically, there is nearly double what we would need for site distance. So there's plenty of site distance for the use of that entrance.
I think this information should help people, because what I saw in a lot of the questions was a fair amount of erroneous information that now that we have the actual facts out there, it should help everyone understand things a little bit better.
I just wanted to add, if I could, I'm seeing some comments too about people who don't plan to register to vote here, and that they should be heard. A lot of this comes from questions asked by people we don't know whether they're voters or non-voters. The questions, we address every question that we possibly can and hear from every person that we possibly can. We received emails and questions and try to answer all of them. So it's not just a question of whether you're a voter here or not. Everyone has, I've seen valid points from everyone, whether you are a taxpayer or just an interested party. So, and that will continue. That all goes ultimately to the decision that the voters will have to make. Do you have enough information? Are you comfortable with what you have? At some point, there may be questions that are not answered. And then you're at the point where you don't feel that you can vote in favor of it based on that, if we can't answer, then that's the ultimate decision on that. Can't answer every question that everyone puts to us on this, but all the information provided here touches on, as far as I've seen, every question that we've gotten. And does anyone else have any questions on the town board?
I think my question would be, so what will we be doing at the town board meeting? Do we know?
I guess we have to, I think for me, we have to decide whether we could do, as Mr. Saunders suggested, have an open referendum if we would do that, or if we're not comfortable with that, or just a general referendum, or that's something that I think we have to individually decide. We won't have a town board meeting before then. And as we've explained, we don't all sit down and figure all these things out. So each town board member has to decide themselves what they're comfortable with, I think. And then as a group decide when we get back together on Monday.
Well, in the interest of trying to put some kind of finality to this thing, if you will, I do think, since this is the week that we are putting together the agenda for next Monday's meeting, we should have a resolution on there outlining process forward, which was in Chris Nadler's note from memo from last Friday. I would advocate that we do that we try to get an answer. I mean, we've been criticized for not having a scientific analytical survey out there. And to me, going out and asking people in a referendum format, would you be comfortable if the town were to find and acquire property that would give access to Canandaigua Lake for a sum not to exceed, pick a number, $5.5 million? Yes or no? So give us that information, whether we use it for this particular property, if it's still available then, or sometime in the future. It would be something more to hang on to than just a couple of hundred people answering a survey dealing with our comprehensive plan. To me, that should be the path forward. Get an answer and get it soon and move on.
I'm with you, Jerry.
And I guess what I would also want is sort of a sunset provision on that, not forever and ever, but, property and again, this is all new thinking through this, but if property should become available within a year or two or whatever we decide, I'm not going to say in the next 50 years, that's, for that price.
Well, if we go to the trouble of a referendum, I would say it should be at least 5 years. Because things don't come up so quickly, all the time. Even though we did have 2 most recently,
And in the meantime, everyone's still free to submit their opinions. It's there's many forums for people to put their input. It's not just this forum here. So we're a very small part of the public forum. And I encourage everyone to do that. Whatever the people decide is, as we used to say, justice is served by whatever is decided. Some people
the Kellogg family is free to do what they want to do. I mean, it's their property, and pulling the contract back, it gives them that freedom. If they're able to market this and sell this property, God bless them. Good for them. I mean, they're free to do that now without having to wait an extended period of time. So I do think, though, that it would be nice to, since we have assembled quite a bit of factual information, Doug and others have done a tremendous amount of digging to put together these various position papers on our website. It would be nice to cap the thing with, well, here is what the people in the town of Canandaigua really think. It's something that we, depending on what your feelings are, you say, yeah, that's a good enough number. No, it isn't. I would like to see that, and have that so that we could finish this thing.
All right, anyone else on the town board?
I'm with Terry.
I think the same thing is because if we don't take some action on it, you may be running across this, either this board or other boards and, the immediate future where you're going to be right back in the same situation again.
All right. Sarah, did you want to
I
say
think
anything?
if I can add, I think as we go forward, we need to be careful. We do need to be careful what is in the referendum. Personally, I have not formulated an opinion yet where I stand on the process. But again, it can't be an unlimited, like you said, Kathy, it can't be an unlimited period of time, because things could change. We've seen this last year. Things can change on a dime, and the economy can change. The economy can tank. We don't even know what the next 2 years are going to look like. Some people are saying the next 2 years are going to be worse than the last year. So there are a lot of things that we have to take into consideration with this.
Right.
Can I
As do
make a
as do the
suggestion?
voters.
Can I make a suggestion that the town board consider the parameters? There is an existing resolution on the upcoming agenda that I've prepared for the Tishner Point parcel. And I think Mr. Finch and I will both spend the next week thinking about parameters and how to revise that resolution. But if the town board can say to themselves, should it be 1 year? Should it be 3 years? Should it be 5 years? Should it be what the price point should be? That kind of thing, then we can really craft a nice middle ground resolution at next week's meeting.
Well, if I could, just for a quick second. So the town board agenda per the town board's rules of procedures has to go at noon on Wednesday. So that's a little more than 24 hours from now.
Right.
So we don't have a lot of time to get something, but let me ask this. I believe that, and Mr. Attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong, but even if the public said, yes, go do this, it would require authorization of the town board. So you could self-impose your own restriction or policy or sunset or whatever you want to call it.
That would not have to be in the resolution, you're saying?
Correct.
Or we could add it at that time, or
You could
when
do
we
it at
draft
any time.
the actual question for the.
Or right, or I mean, but regardless, Chris, if the public says, yes, go ahead and purchase whatever the question is, then the town board would still have to authorize that for a whole variety of different reasons. And they
Absolutely.
could choose not to.
Always
also.
with that level
Right.
of expenditure, yeah.
Absolutely, and I'd like to point out, based on the comments, and there's always a concern, but the people making the decision ultimately, based on a vote, would be elected officials who the majority of the town residents have elected to these offices of public trust, who have a fiduciary duty and are bound by New York State ethics laws. And while there may be a concern in some municipalities that somebody's brother-in-law hits the lottery at the expense of the taxpayers, I really don't think that is a concern here. This town prides itself on its transparency and it's upholding rules of ethics. So I think I'd caution people against making accusations like that.
All right. And along those lines, if we are going to do this by bonding, we would put that in the resolution as well. If its purchase price is over a certain amount, it has to be, we would add that to the referendum as well. So we would combine and not have to put another step in there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's smart. We had talked about that at finance.
Right. Okay, anyone else on this?
Kathy, if I could just ask two questions, since we are working to prepare the agenda, just so I make sure I have some general direction from the town board. Obviously, this is not a town board decision, but I need to know what to put on the agenda in terms of a resolution, and you could always vote no on it or amend it, but just kind of give me some guidance here. I think I heard you say yes for a special election in the month of November, and Chris and I will work tomorrow.
November?
May.
May.
We said
I'm
May.
sorry. I misspoke. I meant May. I'm sorry. In accordance with Chris's May. So a special election in May. I heard a variety of different things relative to referencing the specifics of Tishner Point Drive. Is that more of a general, or would you prefer the specific, or both? Just help me understand where you're at on that.
Generic.
Yeah.
I
Should be
think
generic.
generic, but you could say consistent with the project discussed as Tishner Point or something, where we are abiding by what the family is asking us to do, but also giving people the opportunity to review all the documentation that we've provided.
I guess we need to hear whether
It's a good way to do it, Linda.
if that would be sufficient to let the Kellogg's still sell their property, if it referred to that.
Okay. All right. I can work with the town attorney, I think, and we can put together something then for you. So okay,
Absolutely. Give me a call, Doug, and we can work that out.
And as you said, we could amend it if need be. This is the first time I heard that from Mr. Saunders, so I'm still processing it in my head about what the proper thing to do is. And as we've said all along, we're talking about this openly and not having had an opportunity to completely process it, which I expect to do in the next day or so. All right, anyone else on this, or Doug, does that give you enough to go by for now?
yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so moving along, we have no presentations, no reports of officials or committees, no public hearings. And now we do have our privilege of the floor. Remember, if anyone would like to be heard, you have 3 minutes. Not my rule, but my job to enforce it. Be respectful, no profanities. This is not a forum for campaigning. It's a forum to speak about matters of public interest, and I ask that you keep your comments to that. It doesn't have to be about Tishner Point. Of course, it's matters of public interest to the town. So if anyone would like to be heard, if someone could help me monitor the questions, the comments, I will try to get to everyone. And again,
Asking people to raise their hand, is that how, or the
if
chat?
they know how to raise their hand virtually, or they can raise their hand actually. So, and we will answer questions that way.
Or the chat?
I am not monitoring the chat, so.
Kevin
if someone would
Saunders,
like
I
to-
believe, is requesting to be heard, Kathy.
Who is it?
Kevin Saunders.
Okay, can you unmute him? Okay, Kevin, go ahead.
Madam Supervisor and Town Board, I thank you very much for listening. And as you, Madam Supervisor, pointed out, I just raised this, an hour and 10 minutes ago. And I can't thank every single board member for entertaining that possibility. Both Trip Pearson and I stand ready and willing to continue to talk to Doug Finch and Chris Nadler about the language. And we thank you for your concern for the Kellogg family. I think it was loud and clear that each and every one of you board members, to include the supervisor, are willing to discuss that generic. And if any way possible, we will be glad to assist. And we thank you again for listening to the Kellogg's and being concerned for them. Thank you.
I think as a board, we probably want to apologize to them for some of the feedback that they've been getting that seems to be unwarranted.
I think it came loud and clear that you have all been subjected to that as well, and as well as your very able appraiser. I guess all kidding aside, I don't know if you all knew that you were signing up for that type of abuse, but I know certainly the Kellogg's were not did not sign up for that, and we appreciate the town working with the Kellogg's and understanding why we are where we are. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Saunders. Anyone else? I see, I did see a hand, but I don't see a hand.
seeing no requests, Madam Supervisor.
All right, I don't see any others. As always,
Oh,
you can reach
I'm
out
sorry.
to, wait, who?
I
Oh,
see two.
Daryl, I
see-
see two. All right, Daryl Kramer. I don't think it's Daryl with a hand raised, but person identified as Daryl Kramer.
It's my husband, George.
Okay,
My question is, this might be a foolish question, but I'm not sure. The question is, you talked about a referendum for $5 million for Tishner Park. Well, let's say we grant that right now. What's to say in 2 weeks, you want to do another one for another $5 million for some other piece of property? Is there a limit how many you can do in a year? So you got 4 or 5 in a year.
well, I think
Think so.
the question is just as to, and that's a good question. Do we frame it just as one property? We're not gonna have, we're interested to use the taxpayers' money all the time. We're not here just out spending millions and millions of dollars that we don't have, and we take it very seriously whether we're even gonna raise taxes while we put the question, but that's a good point. We're talking about one specific property, or if it's more than one, do we go to referendum again? So that's a good point.
But obviously, Madam Supervisor, if I just could, the town board is elected to make those decisions and can make that
Right.
decision whichever direction they choose is most appropriate.
Right, and with all the ethical obligations that we always have when we're dealing with taxpayer money. Okay, Patricia Brewer. Go ahead, Patricia, you're unmuted.
No, you can talk now.
I have a question on Patricia Brewer's computer here. I'm a little confused now with this permissive referendum, how specific it has to be, but leaving that aside, if the town has established a $5.5 million value on the Kellogg property, this of 2 MIA, does that mean that if it doesn't go through the sale, that you'll revalue the Kellogg property $5.5 million?
Madam Supervisor, if I could, I think it's inappropriate for us to comment on private property. The full town will be getting a town-wide reassessment, and it'll be up to the town assessor, I'm sorry, to make that determination on what they feel the value is at that time. And those results can always be challenged through the Board of Assessment review by the property owner.
Okay, Mary Ann.
Mute or do you? Oh, you unmute me? Thank you. I do not live in New York State, aside from the property that we own there on Westlake Road. So I am one of the people that would have to, in fact, give up my domicile and taxpayer status in another state to come register to vote in Canandaigua. So I understand that I'm pretty low on the totem pole of opinions to consider, but at the same time, I do pay a lot of taxes. And I think there might be several people, probably dozens of people in our situation who either live in another part of New York State part of the year, or might live in another state part of the year and then are just, 5 months in, or the summer even in Canandaigua. So I'm just wondering, is our input considered, not just in this case, but in any other thing? Or do you feel like really your obligation is to the people who elect you? I've often wondered where my status is.
Well, this is not, question and answer. I do think it's important to answer that for myself. I feel an obligation to every person in the town. It's not just taxpayers, not people voting. They're human beings. They live here. No one is more important to me than any other person. Everything that we've been taking, you're muted, sorry, but when I take any decision into consideration, it considers all angles. As I've said, many of the questions that we've answered came from people who are opposed to this, who live on Westlake Road. And I'm not saying anyone's opinion isn't valid. Of course it is. Property owners want to protect their property, and there's a lot of things to consider. Ultimately, what I decide, everyone's opinion, I'm just one voter when it comes to a referendum. and I take everyone's, including my own opinion, into consideration. That's just me. All right. Greg.
Thank you, Kathy. I just have a couple of quick comments. There was never a referendum vote request for Campananda. There was never one for the highway garage of 5.9 million, nor was there one for the water system upgrades we've just done over the last couple of years of 7.5 million. I do want to make a comment about speed. We started this activity, as everybody knows, in late November, early December. I can't give you a date because I don't have one, but I do have a belief that, you know, starting this activity, let's just pick the date of December 15th. We had a board meeting on December 21st where it was brought up and discussed, and that's where the opening of the public hearing occurred. We continued into January 11th. Then they had the January 11th video conference, and I called for a vote at that point. And so what we've lost is precious time by not setting the vote date in time to meet the requirement of the Kellogg family, which was known. And so I encourage us to think about that for the future. That there is a mechanism here that allows the town board members and the supervisor to make that vote. They have so declined. I will tell you, I'm disappointed in them declining that vote opportunity to represent all the citizens, as you say, Kathy, on the town of Canandaigua. I just really believe that fundamentally we have an opportunity here that will not reappear. And I understand the risk, I understand the reward, and I believe that the leadership from the board and the supervisor, if we had let it at a pace that was more traditional in a real estate transaction, we may have been further along than we are. And I asked them to consider that on their March 15th meeting, that there's still an opportunity for this board to make that call directly, the five of you, and then ultimately have it executed on by the middle of April, 15 days off of the April 1 target. So there is a way to recover from this. And I just believe that, and I'm interested to hear what other people feel about this too. It's my position. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you my position, and I will close with that. Thank you for letting me speak.
So is that a request to spend 5.5 million without a vote? I mean, the other things were necessities, like we've clearly stated, public health, public safety. And we have to be mindful of wants versus needs and giving people the chance to vote in a referendum in a situation like this, which is something that is wonderful, but it is also a want over a need and does not versus the health and safety of water or highway or roads or things like that.
And if I could just say, this is not a traditional real estate transaction. We represent the whole people of the whole town. And so you and I might have difference of opinion on that, but as I said, I think everyone's opinion on it is important. And the input that we've gotten in the last couple of months, while it was maybe, in your opinion, a waste of time, to me, I learned a lot from, wasn't pleasant at times, but I listened to everything everyone said. And I'm not going to rush into something just because a traditional real estate transaction might be done a certain way. This isn't a traditional real estate transaction. This is not me, $5.5 million walking in and buying it. I would have if I had, but that's not the situation. So while no one's probably happy with that situation, I did it based upon wanting input from everyone. I've listened to everyone, and maybe we lost an opportunity, but that's the way government works. You have to sometimes, listen, stop, listen, be careful, and you can't necessarily rush into things as an independent real estate transaction.
I'd have to agree with that most real estate transactions, I think, occur between private individuals, corporations. When we're dealing with the public and dealing with the public purse this way, and we have questions that arise, I think we have an obligation to the public to try and answer those questions to the best of our ability, to assemble the facts and present that information prior to making any move whatsoever. So,
and it's not even just one person making that decision. We're a board. If I were to have a transaction myself, I would have stepped in and done other things, but I am bound as a town supervisor to acting in certain ways. So
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're
And
saying, but that's not the way I choose to operate.
No, I think we have to operate this
Mhm.
way. We have to do everything we can to put all the information out there in front of the public, get their comments, and then make the best informed decision that we can.
Good, bad, or otherwise, right?
It's the only ethical way to do it. It really is.
All right, Aaron Mills. You have 3 minutes, Aaron.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for taking the time tonight. I think what's important, and I've been following the chat as well, and Mr. Seaman, who I don't know, brought up a comment. What I hear from the town board is that the town board wants input and wants to hear how taxpayers feel and make their decisions based on how those taxpayers feel. We know that Canandaigua is not an ordinary town and has a disproportionate number of seasonal residents and residents that do not call Canandaigua their primary home. I believe it is a burden to ask someone to change their place of voting, and it is a burden beyond what is acceptable. The taxpayers are not a group of people that we can't find out who they are. We have every single person's name, every single person's mailing address. I think we must ask ourselves, is a referendum the most effective manner in which to see how the taxpayers want to vote? And I think if we look at the spread and how people live in Canandaigua, and a lot don't live there, especially in May, is that sensible? I think it is far more sensible to mail something out. And if that's a survey, however you may do it, to every taxpayer, I personally fall into that category. I wonder if, can you do an absentee ballot on a referendum, even if I were to register to vote in Canandaigua? These are questions that I don't know the answer to, but I think it's something you must take into account and not just look to a referendum, but look at all avenues you have. And I think mailing something out to each individual taxpayer and receiving input that way is by far the best way to be heard and to hear from the most people out there. I have not voted for a single person on this town board. I do not vote in Canandaigua. If you mail something to my tax address, I will respond. I ask in those referendums, look at the number of people that respond to them. How does that compare to your number of taxpayers? And I think what you'll find is the survey of the population is extremely small. So to make your decision based upon a small section of the population isn't nearly as important as reaching out to your tax base. It's an imperfect solution, but I think it's better than just a referendum vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So a little disappointing news because it's such a beautiful piece of property. But over the last few weeks, we've heard a lot from the town board and the town manager. So thank you super much to all the town board members for putting a lot of time into this. I'm sure it's been pretty heavy. And especially a big props to city manager or town manager, Doug Finch. Thanks a lot, Doug, for all your tireless effort and all the staff that helped you out with that. I'd like to recommend that, and I'd be willing to volunteer to help on this initiative. What would it look like to put a vote to all of the residents or electors, as Mr. Nadler says, that encompasses all of the ideas that we've heard in these meetings over the last several weeks, including and learn from other communities that have done this, that have passed referendums to put money aside with sunset provisions that put money aside to purchase and manage operation and budget, maintenance costs, and put that into a large referendum and be able to vote on that as a community. I lived in Colorado, went to graduate school out there. Many referendums, many communities in Colorado pass referendums similar to what we're speaking with. I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. we can learn a lot from other communities. And I would think that would be a good idea to move in that direction. I would recommend and maybe just ask the town board to consider a referendum that encompasses all of the ideas we've heard over the last several weeks. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else's hand up. We have no more resolutions and motions. Approval of minutes. Chargeback bills, we have none. Other business, none. Final privilege of the floor. And executive session. Do we have anyone requesting executive session?
No, just Kathy, if I could, just so that the town board's aware, I will be requesting, I believe it is 5 or 6 executive sessions on March 15th. So have some coffee before the meeting.
No dose.
Thanks for the warning.
All right, everyone. Happy to hear from everyone. I hope you continue to reach out to us, and thank you for your patience this evening and your civility. Much appreciated. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Care.